Okay, so I hope you have looked at task number 6 on the worksheet, which should have been worksheet number 2. I just noticed. I'll fix this before I post the slides. So you've seen that there are triples. They are correct in terms of syntax, but the subject, properties, and object don't really work together. So the question now is, how can we define the properties so that we have the correct subject and the correct object that go with it? So first, just like defining that something is a class, like person is a class, student is a class, novel is a class, we also have to define that something is a property. So in the examples, we had properties like studies at, student studies at a university, person has email, and so on. So all of these are properties. How do we define a property? Again, we're using RDF type. And now we say that P, which is again a URI, is of type property. So the properties, you know them. This is what gives us the relationship between subjects and objects. Like Joe is a friend of Jane. So is a friend of is a property. There is an exercise, but just like before I interrupt, we're going to do an additional exercise right after. So if you like, do a quick pause, do the exercise here on properties, and I'll talk about the next exercise, which comes right after. So the first step was defining a property, like is a friend of, or studies at. And now to address the problem on the worksheet, this task number 6 problem, we have to also define for a property what we can put in the domain and in the range slot. So what can be the subject and the object that goes with the property. So if you have a property like studies at, then in the subject side, you have to have a student, and on the object side, you have to have university. Otherwise, it doesn't work. If you say Concordia studies at Joe, then it doesn't work because studies at expects a student on the subject side and a university on the object side. So this is something you define together with a property, the so-called domain and range, just like in math. So this goes into 2 steps. You define the domain for a property. And this is done again using a triple, saying that for this property, the domain is the following class. For example, for the property studies at, the domain has to be a person. And then likewise, you define the range, what goes into the object slot of the property. So you say for the property, the range is the class C. So again, as an example for studies at, the range is going to be a university. So one thing that you should get used by now is that a property is just another URI. Well, you have so far you've seen URIs, for example, in DBpedia, like Concordia University, but the property is also a URI. So something you can look up online if you want to know what, for example, we looked at the homepage of Concordia or the city of Concordia University. This is another property you can look up online, and it is defined using RDF triples. So when you first encounter it, it can be a bit confusing because we're talking about properties, and now we want to define the property, like the domain and range of this property, and we use this using RDF properties, domain and range. So you define properties of properties using RDF properties. But believe me, you'll get used to it. After working with it for a few weeks, you're going to be an expert on working with RDF and RDFS. So for this exercise here and this one here, go back to the worksheet.
So in task 7, you have to define a property using RDF, and then in task 8, you define the domain and the range for this property. And then I'll see you again in the next lecture part. Good luck.